And without further ado, we'll turn this over to Mike. Take it away, Mike.
Thank you very much, Chuck. Hopefully you can see me now, and I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for joining us for this very important webinar, and we're really excited about that, and I'll explain in a bit why we're excited about this particular webinar. We are speaking about digital daily Kaizen, but we need to set the foundation, and so we're going to primarily talk about daily Kaizen in the very beginning. And when we talk about daily Kaizen, we're talking about three main elements: the organization structure, the team structure at the natural team level, and the visual management, as well as daily team meetings. And so that's kind of our focus, but then we want to bring the focus and talk about the transition from the manual, the physical world, to the digital world. And so what we're excited about is that we also have some people joining us. One of our great clients is Aflac, and we have two people. Julie Nicely and Josh Chandler, who will be speaking about their experience in converting from the physical daily Kaizen meetings to the virtual daily Kaizen meetings. And so they're going to speak about 10 minutes each. And then we're also going to have someone from a colleague from KI Portugal, Teresa Bravo, and she's going to be speaking about the Miro platform towards the end of the webinar today. And the Miro platform is a really cool platform that I think you'll all like, and we're using it quite a bit now internally as well as with our clients. But Teresa is going to show an example of how the Miro platform can be used, or they have used with their clients for their mission control room, which is real exciting and very interesting. So I'm going to speak for about 45 minutes or so, and then each of the three speakers will spend about 10 minutes. And then, as Chuck said, we'll have the Q&A session. So we're really excited about this, and we hope you gain quite a bit of information. Now, with regard to digital daily Kaizen, hopefully I don't have to tell you this, and it's kind of apparent, but in this crazy world that we're in today, in the new normal, communication is more difficult than ever before. And so it being so difficult, we have to step up our efforts with regard to communication. Daily Kaizen is about communication. We know that there's been many studies over the years where people complain about lack of communication within their organization. And in many organizations, a lot of that has been resolved with daily huddle meetings or daily Kaizen. Now we go into this virtual world, many of us, and we make the transition or try to make the transition. And some people might immediately think, well, we can't do this anymore. Well, we can, and it can be extremely effective. We do it ourselves internally twice a day. And it becomes extremely important because of the lack of face-to-face communication. So that's why this webinar is so important. And I want to also mention that, of course, this webinar is brought to you by our sponsor. Our sponsor is, once again, Appeal Production. And Appeal Production is a video production company that aims to give your business the appeal that it deserves. As a full-service video agency who loves what they do, they have one ultimate goal, and that is creating visual materials that work. And they've created some visual materials for us, and it's been fantastic, do I dare say, but it's been very appealing. It truly has. With skills in video production and graphic design, motion graphics, and creative counseling, they have the skills necessary to ensure the company stands out above the rest, and they are bringing this webinar to you for free. We have Andy, who is with Appeal Production, and Andy wanted to say just a few words before we get started on the webinar. Andy, are you there, and can you go ahead and speak?
Hey, Mike, I'm here. Do you got me?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thanks for having us. We really appreciate the opportunity, and great job on a little bit of an explanation of who Appeal Production is and what we do. We do love inspiring business growth with dazzling video, so that's how we're here to help, and really appreciate the compliments on the videos that you've enjoyed that we produce for Kaizen. You know, on this topic, I think it's a great one as well, because we implemented daily Kaizen meetings a couple of months ago, and when we could actually see each other and be in each other's presence in person. And I'll be honest, I was skeptical at best about the impact that they could have. We had tried to do regularly scheduled meetings previously, and they never went well. It always felt like that there was some tension in the room, some, you know, people wouldn't talk or wouldn't share, and so we stopped doing them. And the beautiful thing about starting the Daily Kaizen, our team was forced to communicate more. Also, though, the structure that it put in place was also, I think, really key to that everybody had a set amount of time. There were parts in there to where we could address things that had come up. And it's been incredible what it's done for our team. I really feel like that we are much more open with each other now. The issues don't linger. We talk about them, and if we can't address them right away, we'll write them on a board and we'll address them at a later time specifically. And for us, moving it to a virtual space wasn't as difficult as I had imagined. One of our employees is remote, and so she has been remote for a year, and she calls in daily. And when we were meeting in person, other than her, she'd call in daily. Now we're just all calling into the virtual Daily Kaizen, and we're continuing to move. We're talking more, communicating, which is imperative, as you said, during this time, and are really thankful for it and the implementation of it in our business.
Thank you very much, Andy. That's great. Appreciate your words too, as well. Andy talked about getting into the nitty-gritty, the business, the layout, the format, and so that's what we want to talk about too as well. So we'll go through an overview first, and then we'll talk about Daily Kaizen, our level 1. So we'll talk about 4 different levels, and our focus today is primarily just level 1. And then we'll talk about the transition to virtual or digital Daily Kaizen. And as I said before, we'll have Aflac and a person from Kaizen Institute Portugal speaking to as well. So it starts at the beginning. And so when we say it starts at the beginning, we talk about what we call the Kaizen Change Model, or KCM. And with regard to KCM, there are 3 main pillars, if you will, 3 main elements to make a full holistic transformation. And that's what it is about. It's not about projects, just doing projects. It's got to be a holistic approach. And so right smack in the middle of this slide is we talk about breakthrough Kaizen, and that's what everyone gets so excited about, and your top level management is going to get so excited about initially, because that's where we see the payback. There's so much potential waste in so many of our processes, and in the COVID-19 world, the waste is starting to pile up too, as well as we have additional communication channels and so forth. So we have that. But we're looking to make breakthrough Kaizen. We call it breakthrough Kaizen because it's breakthrough improvements. We're looking at double-digit improvements year over year. And that's when we tear apart processes together and work as a team together, and identify the data, identify the waste, identify the opportunities for improvement to make those huge improvements. That's great. That's what we love to do. But you need the other 2 parts. The other parts are on the right side is Leaders Kaizen. And earlier I've talked about different parts of Leaders Kaizen. On Tuesday, I gave a webinar on virtual Gemba walks, which is a big element, a big part of Leaders Kaizen overall. But this is to develop and shape Kaizen leaders internally so that they grow and we promote their growth. So this is all about changing leadership behaviors and management systems and teaching people how to lead by example through the use of leader standard work and Gemba walks and doing process audits like Kamishibai audits, those types of things. It's absolutely essential to have leadership actively and intimately involved in the entire transformation and leading the effort and supporting the people who will actually make all the changes. So those 2 elements. Now, our focus today is Daily Kaizen, and that's about changing behaviors and changing culture. So we all talk about changing culture. Everyone talks about, we got to change the culture. It's hard to do. The only way we can really change culture is to first change behaviors. We're talking about behaviors of all levels. So we want to change the behaviors and the culture within the organization. And ways that we do that is through daily management, and providing that focus and providing that accountability to our processes and making sure that we're always focused on improving those processes. But the only way to do that is to constantly monitor how well we're doing, and are we achieving what we've set out to achieve for that day, for that week, for that hour. So our focus is on Daily Kaizen and how we will develop our people and sustain improvements. Because when you have breakthrough Kaizen projects, It's a project. It ends at some point. It has a drop dead date. And at some point, though, it has to be carried on. We have to carry on the changes that were made. And we can only do that through daily Kaizen. So when we end a breakthrough Kaizen project, we take it up through daily Kaizen and make sure that we're constantly monitoring and constantly sustaining our improvements and making additional improvements. Now, this is one of my favorite slides, just because it kind of shows the transformation process over a period of time. So if you look at the x-axis, that's time, and the left axis, or the vertical axis, the y-axis, it could be any kind of improvement. It could be productivity, could be quality, could be throughput. And so what you have is a series of steps. And so at the point where it says 1, you have this nice escalation, this nice incline of improvement in whatever you're measuring. And then you have a steady incline for a period of time, but it's still going up. And then another nice big bump, and then a steady incline going up again. And that process is what we hope to see, and that's what we try to build with organizations. Okay, so that big incline, that first step up, that's through breakthrough Kaizen. That's where we make those breakthroughs, and we get those big improvements, and we'd love to see those things. But now we need to sustain it, and that's when we have those areas of this curve, which is kind of level but just a slight angle up. That's where daily Kaizen is actively working. The team is actively working in sustaining all the improvements that have been made so that we don't take a dip down, we keep it that way, and then we continue to make improvements. We're making small improvements, everybody, every single day, all the time, making improvements until we come to the realization that we need to focus in on another project, and we challenge ourselves, and we do another breakthrough Kaizen. And that cycle continues. That's what we're trying to do. What element is more important? It's hard to say. Both are so important, and they have to work together. They have to be part of the same overall transformation package. So to make that transformation, how do we do that? We talk about change principles. What are the key principles in order to decline or abet the resistance that we experience in so many organizations? And so what are those principles, and how do we transform ourselves? The organization can be thought of as, in many cases, a big old elephant. And we all know that an elephant is slow and they're hard to move. And so if you think of the organization that way, and then start taking and looking at the change principles one by one and how we can move that elephant. So it starts off by making change and improvement a strategic priority based on your strategic objectives that are laid out for the next 3 to 5 years. And then break those down into annual objectives, and make sure that we develop and deploy the objectives and come up with plans, whether it's value stream mapping and Kaizen events or daily Kaizen, to achieve those objectives. So it starts off on the left side through balanced scorecards, through Hoshin Conry. This is what we try to do in the very beginning to direct the rider who's leading the elephant. Then we got to shape the path for the elephant. And how do we do that? Primarily by what we just talked about. It's making projects to change the Gemba meaning the location where the value is being added, and to also instill new behaviors in the teams. That's daily Kaizen. So basically what we're saying is to shape the path. This is where our daily Kaizen comes into play, and this is where our breakthrough Kaizen comes into play. Those 2 different types of changes. So now we've got a direction and we've got a path on how we do this. And we lay out this path or this roadmap, and then we begin to motivate the elephant. How do we do that? Success stories. We start off in areas, pilot areas, in which we implement both. We implement both breakthrough Kaizen and daily Kaizen at the same time because they are and will be so interchanged. There's so much overlap between the two. So we develop excellent pilots in areas in which people are constructive and there's a lot to gain. And so we engage people and team leaders, and then there's buzz that builds up in the organization, like, what's going on there? I want to be part of that, which is the next part of motivating the elephant, where we engage more natural teams. Natural teams are just what it sounds like. These are teams of people who naturally work together because they have a common purpose or a common frame of mind or common products and services that they're providing. They have to work together. They're naturally there. So the natural teams now understand and see this buzz, and they're excited about it. And so they begin to look at how do we improve and how do we implement and deploy into our areas. And then we have the deployment model. Finally, we motivate the elephant once again by running additional Kaizen events and further improving, further challenging the team on how they can improve with regard to throughput and quality and productivity. And so we start to use our tools, Kaizen events, and we coach. These are the things that we want to do in order to change the overall culture. Now, what we talked about before, what I mentioned before, is that with regard to daily Kaizen, we talked about 4 different levels. And in the lower left-hand corner, you see level 1. That's our primary focus today, is team organization. And beneath the words team organization, you see the letters TM, which stand for team member, and then you have TL, which is a team leader, and then a group leader. And the idea is, of course, team members report to team leaders, and then team leaders report to Gemba leaders, group leaders. So this is our focus. Now, what are the main tasks of that team leader? Well, number 1 is to motivate the team members in order to achieve the team's mission and the targets. And hopefully these missions and these targets of the team are well aligned, as they should be, with the overall strategic objectives of the company. That's part of the Hoshin-Conry process, and make sure that we cascade our mission, our vision, our principles, our objectives all the way throughout the organization. And then the team leaders there to motivate the team to achieve. How do we do that? Well, we need to see how we're doing all the time. And this is where daily Kaizen comes into place. We need to see how we're doing. What's our scorecard? It's like going to a football game or a basketball game. And I know it's probably a bad analogy because that may not happen for some time right now. But anyway, the idea is you got a scoreboard there, right? You have to see the score. You want to see how much time is left. How are we doing? How do we make adjustments? It's the same thing for a team, for a natural team. And the team's leader goal is to make sure that everyone knows and sees how they're doing throughout the day. Are we meeting what we say we plan on meeting? And then the team leader needs to check on the standards. We've developed standards. Those standards are the team leader standards. They're the team standards, but they're responsible. The team leader is responsible for those standards and making sure that we abide by them, we adhere to them. And if we don't, why not? And should we change them? Should we improve them? But that's another responsibility. And we're always working better, more and more to improve those standards. This is what's going to create that culture. Daily Kaizen is about creating that culture. And team organization is the first level, the first step in doing so. So in this slide, we talk about, you see in the lower left-hand corner, tier 0, we have team members. In this example, we have 5 team members that are represented by 5 red dots, and they all report into a team leader. And then the team leaders, of course, all going to report into a group leader. So what does the team leader do? They provide the guidance, the instruction, the direction to their group of people. They monitor the results, the KPIs, they check on those standards, they train team members, they get trained themselves because they should know all of the processes themselves. And they coordinate and are actively involved in making process improvements. And that's what's going to provide the motivation. It's not like it's going to, the team leader's tasked with providing motivation by involving them in the KPIs and the monitoring and getting them involved, actively involved in making improvements. That's what motivates people. So this is what a team leader does. Now, why are we doing this? Well, we're trying to do this to make this big transition from a traditional organization to a Kaizen organization. Traditional organization is up in the upper left-hand corner of this slide. And in the middle of the slide, you see the different levels of management: top management, middle, frontline, and team members. Now, what the slide is basically saying is that, hey, we got a lot of people that are spending time on daily management and firefighting. And I'm sure that that's even more the case today with everything that's going on. And so what people realize is that, you know, if we're going to work on the business rather than in the business, because this is an image of working in the business. If we're going to work on the business, we need to get involved in problem solving, in improvement, in strategic initiatives, in strategic objectives. We have to change that distribution of how we spend our time. And so we make that transition, and you can see on the bottom left-hand corner that team members are still spending a lot of time on daily management, but now also standardization, making sure that we're following the standards and making sure that we're assessing ourselves against the standard and making sure that we improve those standards all the time. Okay, but they're spending a little bit of time on problem solving as well. And then you go to the next level up, which is our main focus here, is team leaders. Team leaders are spending less time on daily management and standardization and more time on problem solving and improvement. That's one of the things that we just talked about, one of the tasks that we talked about. And as you go up the levels, that the same is true. So everyone is involved to some degree in problem solving and improvement. The idea is to swarm on problems, swarm to problems. When there are problems, we all work on them at one time to alleviate those problems, to identify root causes, to make improvements. That's what we talk about swarming. But top management and middle management is also going to work on strategic objectives, the red part of the flag there. So that's the transition that we're making. Now, how do we do this? Well, we do this one way by changing the culture through daily Kaizen. And in daily Kaizen, for team leaders should have a short span of control. What does that mean? Well, let's move away from the idea of a team leader having 58 people in this slide, 58 people reporting to him or her, or 30 or 40 or whatever it might be, and bring it down to something that's more manageable and reasonable. We usually recommend in the area of 4 to 8 people, 4 to 8 direct reports per leader. And why is that? Because the leaders have to be leading efforts in Kaizen, leading efforts in improvement, leading efforts in standardization and adherence to it, and leading efforts in visual management and always knowing exactly where we are. To do so, lean team leaders need to have or follow the 3 golden rules of team leading. So what are the 3 golden rules of team leading? First is to react quickly to alerts from the team. What does that mean? Well, having some kind of system in place so that there is a problem. Now, if you have 58 people reporting to you, it's going to be really hard to react quickly to alerts from the team. So a team member needs to have a vehicle, a means of identifying problems. One of the key principles of Lean is to make problems visible. So if someone has a problem, they need to pull a cord. So we use the word and-on sometimes. And-on just literally means cord. And that means if I'm having a problem with assembly or a service that I'm providing, I have a physical means of pulling something, and that might set off an auditory signal, a visual signal of some sort, so that people can swarm to the problem. And so we need to have physical means of doing this. I've had companies that I've worked with, some clients that I've worked with, where they've had a different type of and-on in the office environment. They'll put a flag up in a centralized area where cubicles are to identify a problem. There's many different ways. Some people have systems in place where they can, if there's a problem, if there's a machine that goes down, there's an alert that goes to your phone, goes to a team leader's phone. And then if the team leader doesn't answer that alert in 2 minutes, then it goes to the next person. But the idea is to always react quickly to alerts from the team, and we could only do that when we have the right ratio. Another golden rule for a team leader is to monitor and communicate team performance. And as frequent as a basis as possible, as frequently as possible, to monitor the performance. If you find yourself monitoring the performance of the team or the team's processes, and you see that we're not, it's not helping, we're not getting some valuable information, maybe what we should look at are what are the other options to monitor more frequently, so we can have more granular data. But the idea is to have a goal for what we are doing on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, and monitor against that. And so if we are not going to achieve what we want to achieve on a scheduled basis, then we can react to it with proper resources, changing out resources, whatever that might be, but we can react to it. The other golden rule of a team leader is to implement necessary improvements. That means they have to have the knowledge of how to make improvements, how to do simple problem solving, perhaps like using a 3C form. A 3C form, for those of you who don't know, is just a simple little form which has a concern for a C, a cause, and a countermeasure. And that might be a simple technique, but we have to understand, and team leaders have to understand how to solve problems, but they also have to see the problems. And so all the problems that we see on our visual management board, our daily Kaizen boards, those should be very apparent and visible to everyone so that we know, everyone knows, where the improvement should be focused on. The other part of this is that team leaders need to allocate time to making improvements. instead of firefighting. That might mean putting in their leader standard work, time allocation for Kaizen events or improvement activities or whatever it might be each and every day. So our roadmap, kind of in summary then, is we go from level 1, 2, 3, and 4. Our focus again is on level 2, which is about the team meetings, planning the work, looking at deviation of performance from actual performance versus what we expect, our expected performance, reacting quickly to those problems, and leader standard work for quick reaction in any daily meetings that occur. Level 2, 3, and 4 would take it beyond that. Level 2 is about workplace organization. This is where 5S fits in. Level 3 is about developing the best standards, SDCA, or standardize, do, check, act, to improve skills and standardize on a training process. And then finally, improvement PDCA, plan, do, check, act, are improvement processes, whether it's using an A3 or a simple 3C, as I mentioned before. Those are the 4 levels, but it all starts with the foundation and the team organization. So this section, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. What is level 1 of Daily Kaizen? It's a tool for the organization of teams. It's how we actually organize and how we work together. Daily is to be understood as frequently. So what does that mean? Well, yes, it does mean daily, just what it says. Are there exceptions to that rule? Yes, I have seen exceptions, and we've worked through exceptions where, let's say I'm working with an engineering group where their projects are 18 months out, and so they might not meet quite daily. It could be Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, but the idea is for your business to do so as frequently as possible. However, there's a caveat with what I say, with regard to what I say in this regard. With the current environment, it's even more important to have daily Kaizen meetings even more frequently, possibly, than what you're doing right now, because we don't have that face-to-face communication if we are working virtually. So we should not be looking at going backwards at all with regard to daily Kaizen. We should be looking at more frequency, more frequent daily Kaizen interactions and meetings. Our 2 guests from AFLAC are going to talk about their experience with this because in both of their experiences, they have changed their daily Kaizen overall time allotment by increasing it because of this very reason. So who are the leaders? The daily Kaizen leaders are the leaders of those natural teams, and they should have special skills, or we need to teach them the skills, and we do that through daily Kaizen and Gemba walks and audits and so forth. So this is all about team organization. And the main tools that we look at are the team board and the standardized agenda. Now, the standardized agenda, when you go into virtual daily Kaizen, that may change too. It's a different world. It's a different environment. There might be a different type of agenda. There might even be different team rules. So we have to look at that as well. So what are we doing here? What are our objectives? Well, with regard to level 1, which is team organization, our objectives are the awareness of waste. Teaching people, getting everyone to understand what is waste, posting it, doing whatever it is, but constantly talking about waste. I have a client who used, they improved their awareness of waste by focusing in on one of the 7 wastes each week. And then they would challenge their team members to look at or find those types of waste, whether it's inventory, whether it's waiting, whether it's overproduction, and the focus would be 1 waste a week and coming up with examples that they've seen throughout the week, just to bring out that awareness so we don't forget what that is. The objective is to create those team boards and visual standards on the team boards and in the entire work environment. Work planners become very important. What is expected? Who's doing what? Where do we have gaps? Where do we have holes to fill? Who can help who? Those types of things. And then training and improvement roles. So these are our objectives, is to establish all of this during level 1 of Daily Kaizen. The deliverables? Well, the deliverables, some of these are going to be quite obvious. Of course, the team board. Now it was a physical board, perhaps, but now it might be electronic or virtual or digital, if you will. Meeting standards as a deliverable. As I said, those meeting standards might change now as we go to more of a digital environment, at least in the short term. KPIs and targets and understanding what those KPIs and targets are, and a visual awareness of whether or not we're hitting those targets, of some kind of visual eye-catching way that makes it pop and stand out when someone's not, a group, a team is not meeting their KPIs for the day or for the week. Work planners, we want the ability to do plan, do, check, act as part of our daily Kaizen, and have the awareness and the training and the know-how to do it properly. Skills matrix is something that a lot of organizations, most organizations, have with their skills matrix, making it very aware and apparent who has got what skills and where we are lacking, maybe where we don't have qualified backups. It's an awareness of what we perhaps lack in terms of resources and expertise in a certain area. So that becomes very, very important. And then another deliverable is the group leader and team leader standard work. What are they doing with regard to improvement, with regard to Kaizen? Are they doing Gemba walks once a day? Are they doing a Kamishibai audit once a day? Are they doing Kaizen activities once a day? Or whatever the frequency the team decides and the boss and the manager and the subordinate agree on. That should be identified and defined in leader standard work. So that's a key deliverable. So what does Daily Kaizen 1 do for us? It creates the habit. We talked about changing culture, right? Changing culture is changing behaviors, and some behaviors are habits. Some of the habits are sweeping problems under the rug so no one says anything about it. Ignoring problems, not bringing up problems because I might get in trouble. That's a habit, perhaps. Not worrying about meeting production goals or quality goals for the day. That's a habit. So we're trying to get rid of some of those bad habits by focusing the team on planning, deviation of indicators. The team meetings are usually short in duration. It's good for the attention span, but frequent. Like everything with regard to lean or Kaizen, the idea is to move away from this batch mentality that we have, not in just production, but in meetings. That once a month meeting in which it's 2 hours or 3 hours long and we review everything for the month. It's too late. It's too late. We want to do one piece flow even for meetings. And so the daily Kaizen concept, philosophy is about that. Frequent and short, with a lot of visual support. It helps to transform people in natural teams to become doers, to become active doers and take responsibility and be held accountable for improvement of the processes. And so the teams then become capable of improving and owning their process. And they want to own and they want to make those improvements on a day-to-day basis. All of this is based on some key Kaizen principles. The first principle, of course, is to create value for the customer, internal customer, external customers. And how do we measure that? There should be a way to measure that, and that could be perhaps one of our KPIs. But that's the focus, is to create value by getting rid of non-value added. And the only way to get rid of non-value added activities is to eliminate the MODA. MODA meaning waste. What are those wastes? Making sure that everyone understands what that waste is, what the wastes are, and always bringing up examples, because oftentimes we don't see waste. We don't know about waste. Involvement. I'm sorry, I got distracted. I'm on a 12th floor and a huge bird just hit the window. So that's why my eyes looked away for a second. Anyway, back to the presentation. Involvement, is getting people involved. And so our daily Kaizen meetings are all about involvement, active interaction and involvement with the team and with the board, the team board. The team board almost becomes a team member in a way. And so we want that active involvement. That's one of the key principles. Then we go to the Gemba. The Gemba, the board is not the Gemba itself. The Gemba is the processes where we're actually adding value. And we want to speak with real data, but we want to see it. We want to see the problem, the process that is related to the real data. Visual management is absolutely key. Good visual management, clear, easy to understand, easy to read. Standardization, developing standards, adhering to them, making sure that all the team, the entire team, understands the standards and are improving the standards, and we're using those things. The worst thing about developing standards is that someone develops them and then they're hung up or they're put in a drawer or they're put in a binder. No one ever uses them. That's crazy. we have to have a way of ensuring that we're looking at our standards, that we're using our standards through such things as Kamishibai audits, which are multi-level, multi-tier audits, short and frequent audits done by different levels of management. We want to create efficient meetings as much as possible and making sure that we're only addressing the things that need to be addressed. We don't just go through a process of covering the same thing all the time over and over again, but we want to review what is necessary to improve, and we want to identify what's necessary to improve by visual means. And finally, autonomy, giving the people, the team members, the autonomy to make decisions, to improve their areas by training and qualification. Now, what's important about Daily Kaizen and why? Why do we do this? And why is it so important that it's the more frequent, the better? And I love this slide. This is one of my favorites for a long time. And this is about a captain of a boat. And the captain of a boat is on location and he wants to go to his island retreat, let's say. And he maps it out. He goes on a GPS and presses by boat. How long is it going to take me by boat to get to my island? And it says, well, it should be 4 days. So the captain gets on the boat and sets the direction towards the island, and then does not monitor how well he is on track until that 4th day when he's looking around. He's like, where's the island? I don't see an island. Where to go? And so he looks it up on the map, looks at the stars in the sky, and realizes that he's way too far right. He's gone off course. And it takes him 3 days to get back to the island. Took him 7 days overall. A month later, he does the same thing. He wants to go back, but he's learned a lesson. He says, that's crazy. I can't do that. I can't look until at the point, it's too late to look when I'm expected to be there. I need to monitor this more frequently. So he says at the end of each day, I'm going to look at where I am located, look at the stars once again, look at the map once again, and identify where I'm at. And so he does that. And he finds out that each day he's a little bit off course, but he makes corrections. He does course correcting throughout the entire process. And he gets there a lot quicker in 5 days, but it's still not 4. He still has not met the standard or what it should be. But he realizes that he made an improvement, which is a more frequent inspection or more frequent check, more frequent monitoring of where he was. So he realizes, okay, so if I got that kind of improvement, going from 7 days down to 5 days just by checking it every day, how about if I check it every hour? And so he does that. He checks it every hour, and he makes little improvements every single hour throughout the 4-day period, and he arrives on time. This is the story, and this is the story you can train other people. And when you're talking about Daily Kaizen, people ask, why do I have to do it this often? Why do we have to do it this often? This is why, is to course correct before it's too late. So what do we have with regard to team boards? Well, lots of things could be on team boards, and every board out there is different and unique depending on the team's needs. That's what's kind of cool, is that you want the team to be actively involved in developing and supporting and changing the boards. But some standard things that we usually recommend are you want to have performance. You want to have some KPIs. You want to have a work plan or work planner of some sort, identifying who's doing what during the day and monitor against that. You want to have some kind of improvement cycle, way to improve, a visual way to improve, and a process to do so. And then we want to track our performance. And then we also want to have team meetings, brief, frequent team meetings, in which we review all the things on the team board as necessary. So here's our minimum requirements. Oftentimes what we say is start off in the beginning and realize you're going to change and you're going to improve a lot as time goes on, but start off with people and performance and continuous improvement. And under people, we have an agenda and maybe some team meeting rules. We have a visual attendance map. Some people have some kind of stress indicator or a check-in of some sort for each individual, or I've heard it called an emo board, emotional board, to see where everyone is at. And you know what? That's really important today in today's world, is to see where everyone's at, because it's quite stressful what we're all working through, and it's a different environment, and so it's important to understand that and see that. In the middle, we got our KPIs, and of course we could have multiple KPIs. We don't want too many. Oftentimes we say 2, 3, 4 KPIs per natural team is about in the right area, but it would be a balance of quality and productivity and throughput and perhaps cost, those types of things. And then the far right side, again, is a minimum requirement. There's tracking charts. There's an improvement cycle, the PDCA. I talked about the 3C before. It could be projects, the projects that we're working on, perhaps using an A3 as well. So these are the minimum requirements that we like to look at. And here's some examples, just some quick examples. You can kind of see the people section, the performance section, the KPIs, in the improvement cycle. You see, and then you also see a lot of mixtures of colors. And each color means something. It's important, those colors. They mean something. And you also see kind of a mixture of digital records that are posted and also some manual markings. But the team has to decide what works best. But the point is, one of the key principles is that we have to be able to make changes now on the fly or during the team meetings so that we can constantly see where we are today. Not at some other point later in life, but today. Here's another example, lots of KPIs. This is a big board, might be multiple teams, but you see KPIs, you see quick reaction improvement cycles. There's some, and right smack in the middle is a visual attendance and a work planner. And on the lower left-hand corner, some agenda. You also have your tools, and the tools have a location. If the color of a pen is important, then we need to have a system in place to make sure that it has a home. So here's another example. One more example on which you can kind of see it a lot more clearly, but this is always nice to show as examples for some companies who are starting off from scratch or they want to make some additional improvements. But left-hand side is the people side, the vision, attendance, some kind of check-in, skills matrix, a little skills matrix on the bottom there. Performance, there's a couple different metrics, a couple different KPIs there, a real nice indicator of the fact that we're not meeting our requirements for that day. And team rules and agenda on the bottom, very simple. On the right side, you have your continuous improvement. You see a version of a 3C form where it says cause and countermeasure. Concern, cause, and countermeasure. And then the work planner or a task Kanban. So these are actions that might occur daily. And so we want to identify those daily actions and to see where they are, where they're at. They might be waiting, and they might be in progress, they might be under review, and they might be done. Another thing that can be done during this environment and during our transition is to integrate the concept of social distancing during meetings. So some people do still have physical meetings, but now we have to be aware of the physical social distancing as well. So there's an example here, a couple images that are good because they identify locations. Now, obviously the locations are too close. Those are not 6 foot apart. We see that, but the concept is still the same, is to identify where people can stand as they are watching and listening and participating in meetings. And if there's just too many people to gather around, some of the companies, some clients have decided to split meetings between multiple teams, but making sure that there's some kind of liaison between the two. So what about virtual or digital Kaizen meetings? What do we have to keep in mind now as we go forward? First, there's a quote from a chief accounting officer of a Fortune 200 insurance company. And the chief accounting officer, or the CAO, said, "I am so grateful we have deployed the CI tools. I cannot imagine where we would be without those daily huddle sessions." They are now moving into the virtual environment with our boards, and they have done so. So this is about that transition. Obviously, having the team together physically is always the best option. It will remain to be that way. We see no reason why that will change. There's so much more and better types of communication when we're together. And there's a sense of camaraderie that we may not get as much virtually or digitally. So that will always be there. But of course, if it's not feasible, what's the next best thing? And that's where we have to prepare. Developing a very structured approach to the daily Kaizen meetings to keep our focus and to make sure that we stick with the principles of daily Kaizen. Those principles that we've discussed up to this point, making sure that we still are adhering to those principles, but we need to plan and work it out in such a way so that we do stick to those principles. Obviously, a good use of digital communication is key, and there needs to be, even more so today, the need for really good facilitation and communication, more so than ever before, and so we have to stress that when we're having remote meetings or discussions or daily Kaizens. So one thing that we should always be aware of is just how do we sound? Kind of do a test, or maybe work with a colleague, or perhaps you're working at home, your wife or your husband or your child, and get some kind of idea or assessment on how you sound when you're talking virtually. It might be different than what you think, and we have to be more aware of this. Is your voice friendly? Is it engaging? If you're asking a question, are you truly asking the question? And are you leaving enough time or space for them to speak? Is it even obvious when you're asking the question? Or maybe are you prepared to give an answer, and so you're not really asking a question? And do you have a good inflection in your voice? We all know that when you attend a conference, and you watch a speech, listen to a speech, the monotone voices can sometimes work on you. So it's even more important in virtual meetings to show some excitement, stress certain things with your voice inflections. So in in the physical world, the face-to-face daily Kaizen meetings that we have, there's a lot of body language that goes on, and we all see this when we have those meetings. I mean, you have the person on the left who's more authoritarian, or maybe they're stubborn, or they don't want to change, that type of thing. That's the image that's given there. The second person is inquisitive or curious, or maybe even confused. And we can see this without even looking at faces, and that's what's nice about this image, is there are no faces. It's all about the body and the body language. The third person there is engaged, actively listening and participative. And the fourth person is just showing a lot of frustration. And so we see this, and so we can see some of this when we're face to face. But you can't do it virtually as well, unless, of course, it's on video. And with video, you see some of this, but not all of it, because you don't see the entire body. So it's important to understand that we have 2 ears and we have 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. And that's important. Listening is a skill. It's a skill that I feel like I'm still working on, and will always try to work on. It's something that comes naturally for some people, and others it does not. And a lot of us are somewhere in between. But it's something we have to work on and realize it's a skill, and practice. We need to make sure that we are not just listening to what is said, but what is meant, or what is the intent of what they mean. And if we're not sure, we ask the question. Okay, I understand what you're saying, but what do you mean by that? I notice, or I feel that there might be some hesitancy. It becomes more important to do this without seeing each other physically. And of course, the other thing that we want to try to do is to make sure that we're not thinking about the next thing that we want to say when someone's speaking. And I know I've done that. I'm sure many of us have done that. Someone's talking and you're hardly even listening to what they're saying, because you're going to come back with your own comment. So it becomes really important. Now, some of the rules that you may change, or you may consider changing, when you go from a physical daily Kaizen meeting to the virtual or digital meeting, is what I'm going to talk about next. So these are things that you might want to consider, and then either determine or have the team determine what are the new rules or guidelines for virtual daily Kaizen meetings. So examples might be, everyone has the webcam on. Everyone should have their lights on, so it's you can see each other pretty clear. That may be a rule, and it might be different for some meetings than other meetings. Another rule is everyone needs to go on mute right away. And of course, obviously, when you are wanting to speak, you unmute yourself. But maybe that's a rule. And I know at the onset of this webinar, Chuck asked several times, please, everyone, put your speaker on mute. And the purpose of that is so that we can all hear. So maybe that's a rule. But then if someone's not following it, that's a problem, right? So how do we do that? Again, the principle in Kaizen is to make all problems visible. How do we do that? Is it a hand wave? Someone raises their hand when someone's not on mute, or some kind of signal, some way to identify when we're not following that. During the call, there should be no food, no crunching, no bags crinkling, those types of things. Maybe that's a rule. These are just ideas and things that I've seen some companies instill into their daily meetings. Digital work is updated before the call. So if we're looking at a digital board, if that's a rule that everyone should update their data ahead of time before the meeting, then let's follow that. Let's make sure that happens and make sure it's clear that it is a rule, a meeting rule. You might want to consider meeting lengths adjusted. I think our folks from AFLAC are going to talk a little bit about that too. Perhaps multiple meetings to encourage more communication, since we're not seeing each other all the time. Maybe shorter meetings, multiple and shorter, or maybe even longer meetings. But I think we have to look at the situation, just not think that things are going to happen the same way. The environment has changed. Maybe using nonverbal signals. I already kind of talked about that. It's a raise your hand or some kind of signal. Maybe someone has a paddle. I've heard some companies doing things like that where they come up with a signal system so that, especially when you have lots of people involved in a meeting, so that it means something. And then that's part of the standard agenda. You might assign specialized roles. Of course, there's the presenter. There's the producer. That might be the person who's actually typing in information on the fly as we're looking at our virtual boards, so that not everyone is doing it at the same time. That's just another option. There could be the host. There could be a person who's monitoring the chats or monitoring the progress of the overall meeting itself. So these are different options, and so these have to be considered. But the point is think about all the roles and the rules that might change as you go virtually. And then, of course, if it's possible, to use interactive platforms. So we're going to be talking about, or our colleague from Kaizen Institute Portugal will be talking about Miro and using that interactive platform, which is really nice. I think Josh is also going to talk a little bit about an interactive platform that he uses with Excel. So this will be interesting for you to hear. But again, the principle is that we all interact with the board. And so how do we do that digitally? So as a summary, this is kind of the new meeting rules for consideration. Video cameras on, everyone on mute while not talking. So this is just a summary of all the different possible rules that you might consider, and there might be more beyond that. One other thing I think that I'd like to mention that becomes really important is that let's also evaluate the effectiveness of our virtual board meetings or our daily Kaizen meetings. What is the effectiveness of it? You probably should have done this before if you have not, with regard to your physical stand-up daily Kaizen meetings. But now as we make the transition to virtual daily Kaizen meetings, we should still have some sort of assessment that's done by a third party or someone outside of the meeting to assess how well we're doing with regard to daily Kaizen meetings, and are they effective? These are some examples of some assessment forms, and these might even have to be modified to have more of a virtual focus. But the idea is to do this and to provide coaching to the team on how they can improve the effectiveness of these meetings since there's been so much change. So what I would like to do right now is to turn this over to AFLAC, and I have, excuse me? Okay, so I have Julie Nicely from AFLAC, and she's going to speak for about 10 minutes on their transition. And Julie, if you're there, just say hi and then tell me when I should change to the next slide. Julie, can you unmute yourself? Are you there? Julie, we cannot hear you. Okay, yeah, we cannot hear you. So let me ask if Josh, are you available?
Hey, Mike, I am.
Okay, so I'm going to go to Josh's first, okay, and then if that's okay with you. And Julie, we'll come back, but again, we can't hear you right now. And if for some reason we don't get that fixed, then I can try to speak through your slides as best as possible. So I'm going to go down to Josh's examples. So we're going to go through the slide presentation. Okay, so Josh, go ahead and kind of introduce yourself, and then if you can speak for about 10 minutes, that would be great.
Sure, thanks, Mike. Oh, Mike, I actually might have to ask you to mute because I'm getting an echo of myself. I'm sorry.
No problem.
That's perfect. Thank you. So my name is Josh Chandler. I work in corporate financial planning and analysis with Aflac, and we started our daily Kaizen, I guess, about a year and a half ago, and it's been a tremendous success. As we began to work remotely with this global health pandemic, we've had to really adapt, and it was a challenge. So we started by just taking our physical board and trying to recreate it as much as possible in an Excel workbook. Due to the size and scope of our board, we use different tabs within Excel for different sections of the board, so as to make it kind of multiple one-pagers, if you will. And some of the big changes we've had to adjust to are communications and continuous improvement. Those were two of the big things that really drove a lot of our progress and effectiveness in our daily meetings. With virtual, they became so much more imperative. We've had to add time to our communications because there's just no such thing as over communications when we were working remotely. And so we've actually added a 15-minute touch point in the afternoons. Our meeting is every day at 9:30 in the morning. So we've added a 3 o'clock, just a round table, just a way to kind of wrap up on communications for the day, any new items, anything outstanding, any fires that need to be put out. We also added a section on our daily board, and I'll show you on the next slide. We don't have to go there yet, Mike.
Okay.
For topics to table and discuss outside of our 20-minute huddle board meeting, topics that really need to get down into the weeds and into the details. And maybe it doesn't truly affect everybody at the meeting. Rather than derail the meeting, we've just added as a tabled topics section. That's helped us continue to be efficient, keep the meeting moving, but also make sure that we follow it up. It's there as an item on our board. We see it, and helps us to follow through with all of that. With CI, it's we've had to stay focused on it because it's helped drive so many efficiencies and yielded a lot of results for our team. We knew we had to really make it a big focal point, and so we've tried to do that as much as possible. Mike, if you want to go to the next slide.
There you go.
And so this is kind of our front page where we begin, and front and center you see our communications. It gets updated. We've got kind of individuals assigned along with due dates, so we know what needs to come off, what can rotate off, who is on point to speak to some of these different communications. In the bottom left corner, you can see our tabled topics section, and it was newly added when I gave Mike this version. And that kind of brings up something that we've really had to do, and that's our board is its own continuous improvement. I think we're making a change just about every week. And I can't say we were that fluid with our physical board. We've just noticed that every week there's a new challenge we have to address, and so we're trying to do that immediately so that it doesn't become an issue. With our KPIs on the physical board, we had printouts, we had colors and graphs, and it was very visual. In an effort to keep things succinct, we've added hyperlinks here to the files, so when we need to discuss them, whoever's leading the meeting can click through, and we have that file available to us right away. If you want to go to the next slide, Mike. Our daily work plan. Instead of going through every detail of every person's work plan, we color code text. So on the left side, you see we have a legend. Highlighted in red is an issue and a call out. Blue is an ad hoc request. Purple is a deliverable. And we just kind of hit things that are color coded unless someone has something that they immediately ask to address. We also have individual stress labels to color code names. That was a change we had to make. As a part of having a collaborative tool in Excel, we ran into issues of having multiple authors in the file at once. So we created, or we changed the settings to make the file shareable. Some of you may be very familiar with that. And I had worked with shared files before, authoring a shared file that we were using a lot of formatting changes. Originally, we were using little smiley faces that you could move around like clip art. What we learned was with shared file settings, a lot of formatting changes cannot be made, such as inserting rows, moving images, things like that, when the file is in a shared format. Well, when you unshare it, now only one person can edit the data in the file at a time. So you start to lose some things. So there's some give and take there. And whenever I know I need to change the layout or the format in a drastic way, I try and do it later in the day when hopefully no one else is in the file. If they are, I can coordinate with them to get out of it or let me know when they're free. That was a little challenge we had to adapt, kind of an unintended consequence, if you will. But I think we've found a lot of things at this point, like the color-coded text. It stands out. It's easy to see, that are working for us. We may change it again in a week if we find a better way, a better mousetrap. But for now, it's working. But it also keeps us from getting bogged down and spending too much time. People know what their jobs are, and so this just helps us kind of highlight issues that are relevant to everybody or where they need help. So Mike, next slide, please.
Sure. You know what? I don't think we have the next slide.
That is okay.
It's the one on the bottom, wasn't it?
It is.
Not?
It is.
Yeah.
That's correct. It's our continuous improvement. And it's structured very similar to the daily work plan. Each team member has their own row, and we have issue, root cause, and countermeasure, and then dates for PDCA. We also have a section for projects, which you may see there. It's not quite populated. We've actually been changing it, surprise, surprise, where after some feedback that we got, we found that really most of our CI belonged in projects, and we needed to focus on short, quick wins. Things that bug you has kind of been our tagline for our CI section. And so we've revamped that. Speaking of feedback, one of the things that we found super valuable was a coaching session with Mike. To give Mike a little bit of a plug, but it was super valuable because we created this file out of need. And after a couple of weeks, we felt like we had a workable mousetrap, but I just had this nagging feeling of there's got to be things that I know we've overlooked. We've kind of gone blind and can't see the forest for the trees. So Mike observed one of our Kaizen meetings and just had some great feedback. The tabled topics was a section was one of those, and it's been very invaluable. I just lost my train of thought. Mike had several great suggestions for us that have helped us continue to improve it, to be efficient, but also to be effective. And that's been one of the things that we just really had to focus on as we're working through challenges. One of the meeting rules Mike mentioned earlier of reminding everyone, hey, look, just please mute your line unless you've got something to speak to or a question to ask. That helps. Just that way you don't have a ton of unnecessary background noise and distractions, and it keeps us moving. So those are a few of the things that we've had to do, and I'm sure next week we'll make another change. It's a whole new way of doing things, but it's been really instrumental in keeping us accountable, keeping us on task, and keeping us moving forward. And so I think we're doing better than I could have expected if you had told me 6 months ago this was going to be our reality. So
that's great, Chuck. That's great. Josh, thank you so much. I appreciate your words. If I had one really quick question, and I know this is a rule that I'm breaking right now because I don't know the answer, and it's a risky question. Are your virtual meetings more effective, the same effectiveness, or less effective than they were done in person?
They're very different, Mike. We've had to make such a concerted focus on communication because I noticed we were missing out on those quick, casual interactions, walking past each other, or, hey, Mike, remember this email? Did you get to look at that? Or, hey, I had a problem. Did you have this? Those little communications that can, if not conducted, can cause a problem later. We're missing out on those. So we've had to change our focus in a lot of ways. Yeah. So is it more effective? I don't want to commit to it, but maybe in a lot of ways it is because we have to be so much more deliberate with everything we're doing. And if anything, it's maybe helped people be more focused and have it front of mind because we are missing those face-to-face and in-person interactions that
Great.
It's driven some effectiveness for sure. Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Josh. I really appreciate your time. Hopefully,
Thank you, Mike.
people found a lot of value. I know I did, and so I really appreciate that as well.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Julie, I'll try to reach out again to you. Are you available?
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, it worked.
Yes, I had to undock my laptop, so I apologize for that.
Great, thank
And
you.
I want to apologize in advance too if you hear a 7-year-old in the background. She knows the expectations, the rules, but I can't promise anything. So I will get started.
Great, thank you.
Yes,
So-
so go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
No, you go ahead. You can see the screen. You're good.
Yes, and is this our first slide?
Yes.
Okay, so going over, let me get started with it.
All right, this
Yeah.
is your first slide. Sorry.
There you go. This was our slide prior to having the virtual huddle. And I can say this, I will never forget the day when Angie, my boss, called me in her office and said, Julie, it is imperative that we do daily huddle working from home. So I need a virtual huddle created ASAP. I will be honest and say I was stressed. Just thinking about all the time and effort that we put in on the physical daily huddle. But I grouped with my team, and I actually had a team member, create our whole virtual huddle in less than a day. So kudos to her, Kiana. She really took our physical board from the office and made it a reality in the virtual world. So I can just say, if it can be done in the office, it can be done virtually. So next slide, please, Mike. So with our virtual daily Kaizen, the daily attendance is typically what we start off with. And it's a little different virtually because you're not in the office. You can't read body language. You can't read tone. You can't read facial expressions, of course, unless they have their camera on. So during the daily attendance, we usually go by very quickly in the office, but virtually, upon Mike's advice, because we were evaluated, so kudos to Mike, he gave us some great input on our virtual huddle. We extended our huddle time because daily attendance check-in was very important for my team. During this process, we not only go over if they're red, they're green, we see how they're doing, both in a work sense and a mental sense, because we're not in the office and we are not interacting as much on a daily basis. So this is very key and important to me and to my team. So the daily attendance section, sometimes in the mornings can take about 10 minutes. So that's very key and important to my team. Something that we did do, making sure that everyone was fully engaged. Mike gave us some great insight on hand raising. We were not perfect in the beginning with the virtual huddle. We asked everyone to put their phone on mute. And also we had to do some training with some WebEx, having people display their cameras, their audio. So just making sure everyone's fully engaged. And Mike touched on it so much today, and it's very important on body language. You can recognize someone in their voice, their tone. And to me, not being in the office and not being able to see them, it is imperative as a leader and as team members, you truly listen to that person's voice that can portray frustration, long sighs, hesitation. So listening to that virtual body language is very important. One thing that is key is our virtual meetings are just like in the office. They have to be purposeful. And I can say, I know, Mike, you asked Josh, to me, virtual, our daily meetings are probably 200% more meaningful because we're not in the office. There's high priorities. We have to get it done. I like what Josh touched on with our KPIs. Our board is ever changing. I just had a meeting before this to talk about new KPIs on our board. We do have a section on our board that we track with the % of invoices posted. we are very stringent that we want to provide our customers with excellent customer service, meaning we want to process your invoice the same day that we receive it. So we capture that as part of our KPIs, and we want to make it meaningful, meaning for the team to see it in different ways. So again, our board is ever changing. I know Josh talked on this about the continuous improvement. We have statuses. If they're green, we don't talk about them. We only discuss things that are red that need attention, or if they're blue, someone needs to speak to it on the team. And we also make sure that everyone knows the rules. I know Mike talked about rules may change, agendas may change for virtual meetings. So we made sure going virtually, everyone was made aware. They were sent out the agenda and the rules prior to us going virtual. And also it's important, as of now, Mike, we haven't advanced in this, but this is the team's huddle. Like I said, I didn't create this virtual huddle board. My team did this. I don't own the board. I don't own the KPIs. I don't own the projects. I don't own the continuous improvement. My team does. I'm just there for guidance and to lead the way and make a path for them to get them done. And also something, and I know, Mike, you talked about the elephant in the room. We were a big elephant. I mean, we implemented this in 2018, and AP was huge elephant. We were slow moving. I don't know if a lot of people will admit that, but we were. So we had to shape the path to let them know it's not about the person, it's about the process, continuous improvement. So that took a while for us. Again, I have to talk to my people personally. I do have those that are introverts. They could care less if I call them on a daily basis, but I do make a point once a week to get on my phone and call each team member after hours just to check on them and see how they're doing, because it's not that in-office interaction. We did exceed our meeting time per Mike's suggestion with the daily huddle. We had a 15-minute meeting in the office. We were not cutting that virtually. We were struggling. Actually, we struggled the day that Mike evaluated us. So after the call, we had a session with Mike, and he was like, you may need to think about extending your huddle time. So we done that because we definitely didn't want anyone to feel rushed. We wanted to keep it to the point, but yet at the same time, we have to make some changes because we're virtual. Also, the rules for the huddle, Mike talked about that. We've had some discussions around that. I don't expect to hear you eating breakfast at the huddle. I do know it's a new world right now. So kids screaming in the background, dogs barking. We just ask that everyone keeps their phone on mute unless they have to speak. Something that I'm very proud of, again, I did not create. If you'll look on this board, we have a project board that's there. My team does a lot of projects.
Julie, do you want me to scroll down?
It's actually in the top section, the project board.
And if this is fantastic, but if you can maybe try to wrap it up in 2 minutes or so, is that possible?
Yes.
Great. This is
I
great.
have my timer on mic. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yes, the project board. Again, we only speak to those that have the red or green, but that is to give my team more insight to what projects we're working on that may impact others on the team. So next slide, Mike. So going through this real quickly, it just shows our attendance. I go down the list in the morning, check in with everybody, chit chat how they're doing. If anyone's out for the week, we have the days of the week listed with their picture of the person that will back them up. Again, this is just like our board in the office, except it was made virtually. Mike, that's all the slides we have?
No, there's 3 more.
Okay, go ahead. Next slide. So again, this slide here, we talk about quality. Quality is big for my team. We just have the certain, I'm going to say, KPIs that we track, and we only discuss the items in red. Again, we bypass the others. And this is one of those things that I'm currently working on with the transformation team at AFLAC, of tracking these qualities and having more KPIs around this slide. So next slide, Mike. So the reduction goals, we do go over this in detail every day. This is one of the slides that does take up a lot of time. These are our key KPIs. Not only do we want to stay in SLA, but we capture those things that are causing us not to stay in SLA. And again, this is a continuous improvement. This slide is ever changing. We plan to have more graphs and trends around this. So Mike, on the final slide, this is our project slide that I talked about that gives more insight to the team and continuous improvement ideas. And we only discuss those that are red.
Julie, thank you so much. I mean, this was fantastic. I really appreciate it, what you've done. Really, I think it's very, very helpful to show what and share what you've done. So both to you and Josh, kudos. I appreciate it. So we are going to transition now to the Miro platform, and we're going to have Teresa speak pretty soon. Just real quick, the platform, some key advantages. It's very easy to replicate existing physical boards. No drastic radical changes. We are personally internally using Miro platform, and I can attest to this. There's lots of templates. There's fishbone diagrams. There's organization charts. There's all kinds of different templates, 5 whys, et cetera, that we can use. It's a collaborative platform that allows everyone to work on the project, the platform at the same time. There's a timer feature so that we can count down the time. If there's 5 minutes on one topic, we can count it down. We can run video or audio through the platform itself, and we could also use some apps integration like PowerPoint or Excel documents and insert them into the platform itself. It's a really nice platform. So what we're going to have is Teresa Bravo from Kaizen Institute Portugal. She is going to share her screen, and then she'll take it from there. So Teresa, are you available?
Hi, yes. Hi, Mike. Hello, good
Thank you.
afternoon. Is everyone seeing my screen?
Yes.
I've started sharing. Oh, great. Okay, thank you. So I'm from Kaizen in Portugal, from Western Europe, and I'm presenting a project that we actually did last year before the COVID business. So the motivation to go digital was different. This is a project we did with EDP, which is the largest energy player in Portugal. It has 14 billion euros revenue, and it actually produces, distributes, and commercializes energy. This project specifically is with the distribution part, and it was a PMO project where we had to manage 60 initiatives, which we separated into 2 separate semesters. So I have 2 boards. This project brought around plus more than 2 million euros savings for the company, and it involved 8 locations and around 20 people. Although Portugal is small, especially compared to the United States, there was some hesitation on behalf of the leaders to drive 2 to 3 or 4 hours every week for this meeting, so we were obliged to go digital. So I'm going to go ahead and tour you through the board. We initially start with a board that's similar to Daily Kaizen. We have the agenda. We are able to see who's there and who's not, the next meetings, and general tensions that we might have that we want to share before the project starts. Then we would go into the KPIs. We would have KPIs regarding how far along each of the initiatives was, and if we were completing the project or not, if there was any alarm here. We would go on to the savings, which was our main KPI. Annualized savings, we can see over here, more than 2 million euros. And then lastly, we would go on to the help chain. The help chain would help us understand which groups of the initiatives needed help, which ones needed attention, which ones were not completing. So we set up 4 triggers that would automatically activate, and which would tell us that this problem needed to be escalated, and would be escalated all the way to the administration board. Then we could go on to the A3s. We would go on to the A3s, which each A3 represents a group of these 60 initiatives, and they would have a leader. Each leader speaks on behalf of their initiatives. They have the initiatives that they are working on and what they have to do, the deliverables. We would go on to key indicators, and I can show you other examples that have more indicators at this stage. Last planner, tasks that would that they have to do or are late, and any dependency on third members or any dependencies that needed to be unblocked. I apologize, some parts are blacked out due to confidentiality reasons, and it's all in Portuguese, so I apologize for that. And we would go through each of the A3s, and each leader would speak in turn. We have more KPIs here. If I go ahead onto the first semester, it's very similar. Some things did change, as with any Kaizen board. It's always under continuous improvement, but we can see different initiatives and different KPIs related to each one of the A3s. All A3s had visual management, so the ones that were red would show that they were falling behind the target. The ones that were green would show that they are on target. I think that's about it. If anyone has any questions about this board or how it works. The main disadvantage for me of this digital or Miro is that it is a little bit updating it is a little bit manual. However, this is no disadvantage to what it is physically, because we have to update the boards. So I think it's very close to the physical reality that we are used to. I enjoyed doing this project. Any questions that I might take, I'm available.
Well, real good. What I'll do is we'll wrap this up in a second. And then if anyone would like to ask questions of Teresa or Julie or Josh from AFLAC, or Andy from Appeal, who spoke at the very beginning as our sponsor, we will allow some time for that. I'm going to take over the screen now. Teresa, that was really good. I really appreciate your time. It is an amazing tool, and what you guys have done with it is amazing too as well. So thank you. Do you see my screen now? Can I get a verification?
We don't see your screen yet, Mike.
Okay. Okay, you should see it now.
Yep, there it is.
Very good. So we're going to wrap this up. And again, as we say to everyone, everywhere, every day, please stay well. Really, please stay well. We hope that we all can do the same. And let's make sure that we follow the guidelines and get through this thing. But in the meantime, there's much work to be done with our focus on processes and process improvement and Kaizen all the time, everyone, everywhere. We have some online training and webinars that are coming up. Here's a quick list of some of the ones that are coming up. So next week, we are doing a webinar on virtual electronic 5S Kaizen event on Tuesday, and you should be getting notifications since you have registered for this webinar. And also on Thursday of next week, the vision of zero defects is still alive. We have a variety of other topics that we will also be providing webinars to, and also some online training classes in the future. So if you have any desires for certain materials or courses that you would like, please get in touch with us. This is how you can get in touch with us. These are our contact information. We have and we provide online training, online webinars, Kaizen events, and coaching. We can customize for you for your specific needs. I was just talking to a client not so long ago before the webinar, and they want one of our past webinars to be done at their facility. Well, not at their facility, virtually for their people at the facility. But there are sponsorship opportunities. Please get a hold of us with any sponsorship opportunities that you would like to take advantage of. We have many different organizations that are willing to do so, and they want to do so because this is also very helpful to society as a whole during this time of need, and to all of us who are participating. Once again, I can't thank Andy enough of Appeal Production for being our sponsor. So I'm going to turn it over to Chuck now.
Thanks a lot, Mike. So, folks, now we're going to have time for a question and answer period, and we can do that in one of two ways. You can either unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question, and we, I believe, still have Andy from Appeal, Teresa from KI Portugal, and Josh and Julie from AFLAC available if you have specific questions for them. Or the second option is you can open up the chat box by using the icon on the dashboard and type it in there, and if you do that, I'll ask the question for you. So one other thing before we start that, everybody's going to receive a follow-up email who's registered for the program. It'll contain a link to the recording of this webinar. It'll also contain a link to a feedback form. If you'd be so kind as to fill out the feedback, we'd really appreciate it. Give us any suggestions you may have for how to improve or for possible subject matters in the future. So with that said, we'll go ahead. Are there any questions out there?
Yes, I have a quick question for Andy. We were able to work together, and your team's done a great job kicking off Daily Kaizen. My question to kind of share with the group is, were there any challenges along the way with you all getting into the routine initially? And if so, what was the countermeasure you put in place to overcome that?
Thanks for the question. I would say the initial challenges were getting people to buy into it. I think I kind of looked at it much like a New Year's resolution with a workout routine, right? Is if you just do it once or for a week, it's not necessarily going to stick. So we had to be really dedicated and honestly accountable to each other that we were going to be there. It's almost as we don't allow excused absences. If you're on vacation, it's one thing. However, if you're not, you need to be part of the Daily Kaizen. It's 15 minutes. Even if it's just for your 2 minutes, you need to be a part of it. So I think, just asking people and kind of encouraging them, and then holding them accountable for showing up each session was probably the biggest challenge to start off. And that's what we did. We just called people out on it, honestly. And in some aspects, when you had people that didn't show up, we're a small team. We had 6 people when we started this, and when one doesn't show up and everybody else is there, there's some peer pressure there, and all of a sudden you notice. So hopefully that answered your question.
Are there any other questions out there? Thanks, Andy. Any other questions? Go ahead, folks. Well, with that, we are at 1 hour and 29 minutes in the Kaizen way. We have kept to our times. I want to thank Mike very much for the webinar today. Also want to thank Josh and Julie from AFLAC once again, and Teresa from KI Portugal. Also Andy from Peel. Thanks a lot for sponsoring this program. Our next one will be held next week on Tuesday, and if you were at this one, I'm sure you'll get an invitation for the next one. So thank you very much, folks, and stay safe out there, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Cool, good.